A woman tries to outmaneuver her stagnant marriage and stalled career by cozying up to her husband's powerful CEO, only to find herself ensnared in a game of manipulation that costs her everything, until she finds the courage to fight back. Before starting the story, where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear. Let's just say, no one saw that ending coming. I used to believe marriage meant being on the same team. But somewhere along the way, I heard background noise in my husband's story. He was climbing the ladder at work, while I was buried in laundry expectations, and his sideways glances that said, "You wouldn't understand." I had a degree, dreams, and ideas sharper than his. But in our house, my ambition was treated like a phase, not a purpose. I watched him rush out every morning, freshly shaven and full of purpose, while I packed his lunch with hands that had forgotten how to write for themselves. The resentment came slow, like water soaking into the floorboards. I smiled at his co-workers' wives, played polite at dinners, and laughed at jokes I hated. Then one night I met him, his CEO. Dorian Blake. The man every room bent toward. He looked at me for half a second too long. And in that moment, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't know it then, but I just cracked open the door to something dark. The first time I really spoke to Dorian, it was over an over-polished dinner table at a company gala. My husband was tipsy, bragging about closing some mid-tier deal, and I was just there. Then Dorian turned to me and said, "You don't belong on the sidelines, do you?" I felt heat rise in my chest. No one ever asked me questions like that anymore. He asked what I used to do before becoming the wife. I told him I had a background in business development and startups. He listened intensely. "You're wasted here," he said. "They clip your wings and call it love." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. That night, Dorian handed me his card with a smile that felt like fire and warning all at once. "If you ever want to build something again, call me." I didn't realize it then, but I wasn't playing with power, I was being played by it. And I was about to say yes. A week later I called him. Just to talk. That's what I told myself. I met him in a quiet cafe 3 neighborhoods away. No eyes. No judgment. No husband. Dorian didn't waste time. He offered me a position on an innovation team he was quietly assembling, outside the company's formal structure. "Think of it like a shadow lab," he said. "We shape the future while everyone else plays politics." The catch: couldn't be public. My husband couldn't know. "It's not about him," Dorian said, eyes piercing mine. "It's about you finally stepping into your light." I told myself it wasn't cheating. It was business. An opportunity. I needed to feel alive again. He complimented my instincts, my strategy notes, the way I thought 3 steps ahead. For the first time in years, I felt like a woman with power, not just a wife with chores. But looking back, that cafe table might as well have been a chessboard. And I just moved my first pawn. I told my husband I was helping a friend relaunch her boutique. He smiled and nodded, barely listening. He didn't even ask the friend's name. That should have been a red flag, right? But I was relieved. The lie rolled off my tongue so easily it scared me. I started working late. Dorian would send over files, confidential market data, sketches of innovations months ahead of trend. I wasn't just included, I was needed. He said things like, "You're 10 times sharper than anyone on my board." Flattery, yes, but also fuel. One night, while we stood in front of a whiteboard at his penthouse, close enough to feel each other's breath, he said, "You know, if things were different." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I felt the heat of something unspoken simmer between us. No lines were crossed. Not yet. But I didn't sleep well that night. I told myself I was doing this for me. But maybe, just maybe, I wanted to be wanted. Dorian pitched one of my strategies to the board. It involved restructuring the company's underperforming verticals using a hybrid innovation model. They loved it. Plotted it. He didn't mention me. Not once. I watched the presentation from a hidden camera feed in his office. Heart pounding. My hands built that plan. My brain crafted every contingency. Later he called me. We nailed it. Couldn't have done it without you. I waited for more. Credit. Recognition. Anything. Instead he said, remember, this is our secret weapon. If word gets out, your husband's going to ask questions you don't want to answer. And just like that, the air shifted. It wasn't collaboration anymore. It was leverage. I brushed it off, told myself it was temporary. But something inside me shivered. Still, the rush was undeniable. I was back in the game, even if I wasn't allowed to wear the jersey. But deep down, I think I knew. This wasn't the first time Dorian had used someone like me. And it wouldn't be the last. After the pitch, things changed. Dorian started inviting me to more exclusive meetings. Not with teams, just the two of us. Wine in his office. Casual dinners at quiet places. He called it mentorship. This company's too small for your mind, he'd say. I'm just unlocking your potential. But he never missed a chance to comment on how I looked. You're glowing lately, he'd whisper. Does your husband even notice? It wasn't just flattery anymore. It was a possession wrapped in silk. And the worst part, I liked it. At home, my husband barely looked up from his phone. He had no idea I was becoming someone else. Someone sharper, hungrier. Dorian fed the fire inside me. Then one night he sent a gift. A necklace, delicate and expensive. No note. Just a text. You earned this. I stared at it for a long time. Was this the price of success? Or the start of something I couldn't take back? I didn't wear it. But I didn't return it either. It happened on a Tuesday. A normal morning. I was humming while pouring coffee, riding the high of a strategy Dorian had approved. I must have looked different. Lighter, even happy. My husband stared at me. You're in a good mood. Is that a problem? I snapped too quickly. He paused. Where have you been going every week? My throat tightened. I told you. Helping Carla with her boutique. He nodded slowly. Right. Carla. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Suspicious. Cold. The way he watched me like I was suddenly a puzzle he hadn't put together himself. That night, I found him scrolling through my messages. He pretended it was nothing. I realized then. He may not know what was going on, but he knew something was. And instead of backing off, I felt defiant. He'd ignored me for years. Now he cared. Let him wonder. I was finally in control. At least, that's what I told myself. Dorian had me ghostwrite a vision proposal for the next fiscal year. Something bold, something risky. I spent 3 sleepless nights perfecting it. He presented it to the board. They gave him a standing ovation. Once again, my name wasn't spoken. But this time he handed me a bonus envelope. Heavy. For your brilliance, he said, smiling like he owned me. I stared at it. My reward, in silence. No credit, no title. Just money. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took the check and shoved it in the back of my drawer like a secret too big to spend. That night, Dorian texted. Celebrate with me. I booked a suite. My finger hovered over the reply. I didn't answer. But the next day, he didn't act disappointed. He acted amused. Like he already knew how the story would end. And maybe, deep down, he did too. I wasn't climbing a ladder. I was dancing on a ledge. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his smile. That smug confidence. Then, at 12:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. One photo. It was me, standing in the lobby of his building, taken from a security angle. No message. Just the image. My blood ran cold. Was it a warning? Test? Proof? I didn't know. But it said one thing clearly: you're being watched. The next morning I confronted Dorian. Why did you send that? He shrugged. I like to know who's loyal. That's when I realized. This wasn't about mentorship. Never was. He had something on me now. And if I tried to leave or expose him or think for myself, he could burn me with one flick of his lighter. And still, I didn't walk away. Because part of me believed I could outplay him. Stupid. But necessary. Because once you've tasted power, even poison can feel like wine. Dorian called it a strategy retreat. Just 6 key players at a remote villa. No spouses. Full confidentiality. He said I'd finally get the recognition I deserved. Name. My seat. My chance. I packed a suitcase with trembling hands. Told my husband I was going on a girls' trip. He barely reacted. But when I arrived there were no 6 people. No team. Just Dorian, a catered dinner, and a folder labeled with my name. Inside were copies of every email, every chat, every meeting. He looked at me calmly. Before you get everything you want, I need you to prove you're not a risk. My stomach dropped. He was showing me the leash. Reminding me he held it. Then he leaned in, voice low. You want to rise? Burn the bridge behind you. That's when I realized. This wasn't a partnership. It was a transaction. And I was running out of currency. The next day, I found an envelope slid under my hotel room door. Thick, expensive paper. Inside was a printed photo. Me and Dorian standing far too close in his penthouse. My eyes lit up in the way you can't fake. Below it, a simple line written in gold ink. You can't walk away. But you can win. No signature. No threats. Just control. That morning I didn't go to breakfast. I didn't answer his calls. I stared at the photo like it was a noose made of memory. I thought I was smart. That I was using him. But this wasn't a chessboard, it was a minefield. And I had just heard the first click. At home my husband asked how the trip went. I told him it was fine. But that night I lay awake, the envelope hidden beneath the floorboard. I didn't know it yet, but that single image would become the match that burned everything. Including me. 2 weeks passed. Then one night my husband placed his phone on the table and walked away. The screen was unlocked. There was a message. From an unknown number. It was the photo. The same one from the envelope. I stared at it, heart racing, until I realized. He had already seen it. Probably days ago. But he hadn't said a word. No accusations. No screaming. Just silence. That was worse. I waited for confrontation. Never came. Instead he became colder. Calmer. Like a man rearranging the furniture before setting the house on fire. He started coming home late. Made vague references to taking care of things. I tried to ask. What did you see? What do you think? But he only smiled. The kind of smile that said you'll know when it hits you. And I realized. He wasn't trying to fix this. He was waiting. Planning. For what I didn't yet know. But I was about to find out. I snuck into his study one night while he was out. I had to know what he was doing behind my back. What I found stopped my breath. Printouts of emails between Dorian and board members. Confidential internal memos. And at the center my name. I wasn't just a pawn. I was the excuse. They were planning a hostile restructure. Dorian was building a case to push my husband out. Claiming conflicts of interest, performance instability, inappropriate emotional entanglements. And I was the leverage. I wasn't helping Dorian rise. I was helping destroy my own husband's career. Suddenly, every text, every compliment, every late-night whisper made sense. He never saw me as brilliant. He saw me as useful. I backed away from the desk, numb. My marriage was shattered. My career, built on lies. And Dorian, he was winning. Ugh. I flipped the board and made my own move. I confronted Dorian the next morning. He didn't deny it. In fact, he smiled. Don't act shocked. You wanted power. This is what it looks like. I felt the floor vanish beneath me. You used me, I whispered. No, he said. You offered yourself. I just accepted the deal. That's when I realized. This wasn't betrayal. It was the cost of admission. I told him I was done. Finished. He leaned back, amused. You think walking away now erases the blood on your hands? He handed me a folder. Inside was everything he'd collected. Screenshots, records, receipts. Enough to bury me and my husband in one leak. You want out, he said. Fine. But when I fall, you fall harder. I walked out shaking, the weight of choices I'd made pressing like concrete on my chest. I hadn't just burned bridges. I'd built them out of gasoline. And now the match was in someone else's hand. I tried to warn my husband. Told him everything. Not about the affair, because there never was one. But about the strategy lab, the lies, the setup. He listened in silence. Then he handed me a folder of his own. Inside, a legal declaration. Divorce papers. Already signed. Filed. He didn't say a word. Just walked out of the room. And I knew. Dorian had already made his move. I wasn't the queen in this game. I was the sacrifice. That night, I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by pieces of a life I didn't recognize anymore. I had chased relevance, power, respect, and ended up with silence, betrayal, and nothing. Until I remembered something buried deep inside me. I didn't need Dorian. And I didn't need saving. What I needed was proof. Proof he'd done this to others. And a way to end his game before he ended mine. I started digging, emails, voice memos, files he forgot to lock. Dorian had a pattern. I wasn't the first woman. There were 3 others. All high potential, all sidelined, all silenced with money, NDA threats, or worse. One of them, Maya J., had once sued the company quietly. Settled out of court. I found her on LinkedIn. Messaged her. She replied within minutes. We met at a small bookstore cafe. She looked like someone who had burned and rebuilt. She told me everything. How Dorian groomed her talent, then turned her into a scapegoat the second she pushed back. She still had screenshots. Audio. All she needed was someone willing to blow the whole thing open. I looked at her across the table. I've got nothing left to lose, I said. She smiled. Then let's end him. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a victim. Felt like a matchstick. We didn't go to HR. We went to the press. We sent the entire dossier anonymously to a major investigative journalist. Dorian's network of manipulation, the pattern of exploitation, the buried settlements. Within 48 hours, it exploded online. Hashtag corporate predator trended for 3 days. Investors pulled out. Employees walked. The board called an emergency meeting. And by the end of the week, Dorian Blake was removed as CEO, effective immediately. No farewell speech. No golden parachute. Just silence and headlines. I watched it unfold from my living room. The same room where I'd once believed success meant proximity to power. But this was real power. Not whispered meetings or hidden envelopes. Truth. And the way it hits when it's finally undeniable. But justice, I'd learned, doesn't come without cost. And some wounds take longer to stop bleeding. When the storm passed, I was left with a broken marriage, a half-empty home, and a name now whispered with caution in industry circles. I was neither hero nor villain, just the woman who took the match to the machine. My husband never came back. He didn't need to. We both knew the damage couldn't be undone. But in a strange way we found closure, not in forgiveness but in finality. He sent me a single text the day Dorian was ousted. "You ended it better than I ever could." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Sometimes the last word is just walking away. I moved to a smaller city. Started consulting again, this time on my terms. No secrets. No shadows. I built a platform for women like me. Too smart to stay quiet, too experienced to fall twice for the same game. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Some nights, I still think about what could have been. But then I remember, I did get ahead. Not by using a man, but by surviving one. And making sure he could never do it again. My name was no longer erased. It was a warning, a statement, and a start. If you've made it this far, here's what I want you to remember. I thought I needed a powerful man to unlock my value. I thought proximity to influence was influence. But real power, it's what you reclaim the moment someone tries to own you. I wasn't just used. I was awakened. And yes, I lost a marriage. Yes, I burned bridges. But in the ashes, I built something that finally looks like me. To every woman who's ever felt unseen, let this be your sign. You don't need permission to rise. You just need the truth. And the courage to speak it. If this story stirred something in you, don't stay silent. Comment below. Have you ever trusted someone powerful and regretted it? Like, share, and subscribe for more real-life inspired emotional stories every week. And wherever you are, remember, your voice is your power.